It's hard to believe that actually in 30 days, 2024 will actually be behind us. What a year. What a year. There were so many highs this year, but as we all know, there were so many lows. We also know the fact that, we are still averaging about 700 kids a day who are entering our foster care system. We also know that through so many national disasters, so many kids have been misplaced. And I know through the help of comfort cases, we truly are making a difference when it comes to giving hope and dignity. Last month, we actually had the fundraiser with Barely Canadian, and it was such an amazing hit that Barely Canadian has decided to actually extend this fundraiser for the month of December. That's right. There's nothing better when you have November, which we all know it's about Thanksgiving and just giving, but then you have December where you just feel that spirit of love, the spirit of love that you want to give to others. And that's why my next guest, I'm so, so excited about. See, my next guest is actually, I consider a brother. I consider his family like my family. I will never forget the very first day that I met him, that I met his sister, that I met his mom, his dad, and I met his grandmother. We were all trying to find a church, a place where we belong. It's not as easy as people think when you are two white men raising four kids of color. But for us, it was about trying to find a place where we truly could have our faith loved as much as we loved our faith. We visited many churches throughout the years, and this was about 13 years ago. And we walked into the most amazing church, the church that I write about in my memoir, the church that I talk about quite so often. And by the way, I'm not pushing my religion on you. I'm telling you about my experience and the experience of our children and the experience of my husband. And I will never forget on that September day that I walked into Fairhaven. It happened to be what we call homecoming, and we didn't even know it. But the welcome that we received, I could feel the love. And then I met the Greens, and that truly changed our lives. So before we go any further, I want to bring on my friend, Jason Green.
Rob, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that warm introduction.
Well, let me tell you something. First of all, I want to say congratulations on you being a new dad. I know that you're weeks into it and it's just so amazing. I hope Aiden is doing amazing. I hope that his mom is also doing amazing. And I hope you're getting some sleep because that's something that is lacking when you have a little one like that. So
I can see sleep just on the precipice. It's just a few weeks away. I'm sure I'll get some sleep, Rob, but thank you. And honestly, I'm so fortunate that I have people in my life like yourself, like Reese, who are just wonderful examples of what fatherhood is. My dad, I have just a tremendous relationship with my father. And so I just have these great examples that hopefully I'm living up to the examples that I've been able to follow.
Well, I think quite often, about your family. I mean, the fact is, yeah, you're exactly right. Your father is a role model. Your father actually baptized all four of our children. I will never forget when I went to Reverend Green and asked him if he would be the one to baptize our kids. Even though Reverend Esther at the time was the Reverend at Fairhaven, there was such a connection with the Greens. And the reason because your sister Keisha, it was her and her husband Everett is how we ended up at Fairhaven. And so it was just so full circle. But then all of a sudden, Jason, you decide to do a project. You decide to do a project called Finding Fellowship. I have watched this, I can tell you, probably 8 times already. Okay. I have spoke about this to so many people. And so now I want my audience to hear about Finding Fellowship because to me, and just to tell you how when I walk away from watching it, and by the way, every single time I watch it and I see my Grammy and Pappy sitting there being interviewed, there's a tear that gets brought to my eyes when I see Grandma Green sitting in my kitchen. And here is a woman, she's now 105.
Yikes.
106. 106. She still lives on her own too.
Still lives at home.
Still is at home, 106 years old. And by the way, I just found out that she just retired from selling Avon.
Is that amazing? Yeah,
It's
she was an
so
Avon lady for
crazy.
60 years and then decided to hang it up. My mother took over her Avon account and she still like pings her. She says, "How's our account doing?" My mom says, "I thought you were retiring." So she still stays up with her clients and her product. Yeah.
Love it. 106 years old. And the fact to have her in our home and sitting here with two white men who adopted four black kids, she said it was something that she never thought she would have and see in her lifetime. So I would like for you to tell us, on an overview of what is finding fellowship.
Yeah, I love that introduction, Rob. And the relationship that you feel with the Greens is the same way we feel about the Shears. And we're so happy to be have you as part of our family, our Fairhaven family, and our personal family. Um, it's so funny that you articulate it as an intention that I decided to go and pursue finding fellowship. Candidly, I would say I stumbled over backwards into finding fellowship. You remember, I was 4 years into being associate White House counsel in the Obama administration. I was a lawyer, a government lawyer, serving the administration happily. And I got the call from my mother that my grandmother, Ida Pearl Green, Grandma Green, had gone into the hospital and she was 95 years old at the time. And we didn't know she had another 11 years in her. The doctors told us that she probably wasn't going to leave. And so that was kind of the wake up call that I needed. Though I'm very family oriented, as you know, I had sort of gone a little bit wayward. I had gone in these pursuits of importance and power. I had gone to Yale Law School. I had joined the Obama campaign. I had gone to the White House. And so I was very consumed in those endeavors, and I hadn't been home in a while. And I hadn't really made time to sit, at my grandmother's feet and hear the stories and be told where I was from. And so this was, Rob, that was the wake up call for my mother to go visit my grandmother in the hospital. And when I went to visit her at Asbury in Gaithersburg, um, she reminded me that when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old, I used to get dropped off at her house after school, and she would take me with her to go volunteer where? At Asbury. And so it was this really beautiful full circle moment that I remembered that my introduction to service was watching her sit in people's hospital rooms late in life and hold their hand or give them a daily devotional, but to make them better present. And it was just that beautiful lesson of what a life of service could be. And so I decided that now it was my responsibility to go and sit there in her hospital room and hold her hand and give her the ice chips and read the daily devotional in the way that I had seen her done. What I didn't know, Rob, was that she was going to bless me. Right. I thought I was there to bless her, but that's kind of the gift of Grandma Green. She was the one that did the blessing. And um, she told me this story, the story that you just articulated to your listeners as the story of Fairhaven, but it really is the story of our family. It's the story of community, and it's the story of how three racially segregated churches, one of which was black, two of which were white, grandfather in 1868, after he was emancipated from slavery in our community, he helped purchase 3 acres of land. And on that 3 acres, he built a schoolhouse and a church and a cemetery.
Yeah.
Well, that church building, that black church, 100 years later, in my grandmother's generation, had fallen on hard financial times and they were trying to decide their future. They gathered one evening to plot that future. And it happened to be April 4th, 1968. And in the middle of that meeting where they were deciding their future, they learned that Dr. King had been assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. What amazed me, Rob, as I was hearing the story for the first time, was that they still decided to
It's
go forward and to vote on a merger to merge their congregation with two other congregations. Again, of those two white congregations, one was Northern and one was Southern. And so Fairhaven is the product of those three small community churches coming together with intention and have now been purposely integrated for the last 56 years.
Yeah, and it's absolutely amazing when you walk into Fairhaven because the diversity that is sitting within those pews is something that you just don't see. You know, as a young boy who grew up as a Mormon in my foster family, it was a blanket of white. It was going to friends' Catholic churches, it was a blanket of white. Going to my friends' Methodist churches, it was a blanket of white. And to go into Fairhaven and see a blanket of a rainbow of so many different nationalities, of so many different people. I mean, you've got Nobel Prize winners that are sitting in those pews. You have people that are professors and directors and that work for NIST and that are scientists and lawyers and doctors, and Fairhaven brings that all together. But the thing that I absolutely love is that, Jason, that church is still standing there, and that school that your grandmother went to. And I will never forget the very first time that we had the chicken cookout at the it was in May. Brought my little ones there. We were all filled and we're sitting there in this school that, and one big pot where people got warm. Grandma Green's pictures are everywhere. I mean, the floors are falling apart. And then you decide that you're going to go on a mission and you're going to make sure that that area is not only a national landmark, but you're having it rebuilt back to the way it was, even when I didn't even know until, watching, finding fellowship about part of this that had burned down. I didn't know anything about that. But you're now rebuilding that. And by the way, every day I get to drive by, and every day I get to see it change a little bit more. I saw the new doors just get put up. The stained glass, that is that beautiful blue stained glass. What made you decide to take on that? Because you've already raised over $2 million.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. It's so funny, I thought that I was making a document. Once I realized I was making a documentary, I thought that maybe that was it. It was my job to tell this story, to tell the story of Pleasant View, this 3-acre community with the church and the schoolhouse, to tell the story of Fairhaven, the church that is the progeny of this beautiful merger in 1968. But then I realized that that wasn't the end of my work. That, as you say, this historic site had fallen into a degree of disrepair. And what had happened was, as the demographics of the broader Quince Orchard and Gaithersburg and Darnestown community, they changed, right? Back in 1968, when this church was falling on hard financial times, it was sort of a harbinger of things to come. The community of Black residents was dwindling. There weren't enough members and residents to keep up the church congregation and the site. And so that population, through hard work and arduous work, have put it on their shoulders to maintain this site. When it needed a new roof, the trustees digged into their pocket and they pulled out the dollars to make, but that was unsustainable. And I like to look back, and what really hit me, Rob, was in 1868, my great 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 grandfather, Gary Green, he purchased that site for $54. Right? That 3-acre site became the cornerstone of a Black community, purchased for $54. It became this, it educated the community of Black children. It was the worship center. This was the sanctuary. This is where people were able to have their cups refilled with dignity and respect when the rest of a segregated world was telling them that they were less than. That investment of $54 has paid dividends over 154 years. Now it's our turn, right? It's our responsibility to make an investment so that this site can continue to bless the descendants, but the broader community for the next 150 years. And so the only way that we could bring the community back into that site safely and to breathe new life into the church building and into the schoolhouse and into the community hall that had been destroyed by fire that we've rebuilt, was to make those buildings safe, was to refurbish them, to make them a memorial and a testament to the ancestors who were the whole reason that this existed in the first place. So we're really excited about the work that's gone into it. There's much more work to be done, but the opportunity that this presents to really return that site to what it was, which is a community center. People can build inclusive spaces, be seen with respect and dignity.
Yeah. And the fact is it's all those things I say all the time about kids in foster care. Having respect, having dignity, having hope. And and I said I'm so lucky because I get to drive home every single day. I get to drive by that church. I then get to drive by Fairhaven, which is my home, before I go into my home. The fact is, as everybody, things do not happen, without people like Jason. We have our movers within the world, the people who are what I call our doers. I say it once again, the world goes around. We all were taught it's done on an axle, but it is not, my friend. That world is spinning because the doers are pushing it every single day. And the one thing about this project, Jason, is that it is truly going to show people and educate people about how a community, and by the way, I've said this before to everyone, your community is not your zip code. Your community is not your zip code.
That's
Your
right.
community is our human race. It is our human race. And this is showing how a community has come together to rebuild something that never, ever needs to be destroyed. But what it's teaching us more, it's educating us. It's educating us. And before we leave, there's something I have to bring up because there is a story that your father said that I will never forget, that touched
Mm.
me in a way that I have never been moved before. So, for most of you who do not realize, is that Quince Orchard actually at one time was very segregated. People of color went to one school, the white kids got to go to the other school. When the white kids' school, was no longer of good, they gave the bad school to the black kids, and the white kids got the new school. It was very segregated, and it was in Montgomery County, Maryland, one of the richest counties in the country, the richest in our state. But this is the story that blew my mind. Your father would, be a totally different school because of segregation still when he was a little boy. The white school bus would pull up and the white kids would get off the school bus. And when they would walk down that street, okay, you would never know that there was segregation within
Mm.
the community because those kids played together, those kids respected each other, the families within that area. And by the way, your grandma Green still lives on that street. you know, Everett and Keisha, they're on the street. Your parents, I mean, still that street, okay, is still such an amazing haven to me when it comes to truly showing how people should treat and respect each other. And your dad told me that story about, how, they really didn't know about the segregation once they were within their neighborhood.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point. And it reminds me to explain even the name of the film. So, Finding Fellowship is both an encouragement. We want people on the same point about doers and being active. We want people to be active about building fellowship. That's one meaning of the documentary. But the other meaning, the name of that haven, that lane that you're talking about, is Fellowship Lane. I literally grew up on Fellowship. The name of the street that I grew up on was called Fellowship, and it was named by the people who lived on that street to honor the fellowship, the dignity, the respect, the digging out of each other's cars on snowy days, the sharing of meats. My grandfather was a butch, excuse me, was a pig and cow farmer, and so he would slaughter his hogs and his cows and would share those meats with others on the street. And so that idea of fellowship was really intentional. It's how I was fundamentally raised, and it's honored in the name that exists on the street. But to your point, there's this institutionalization that happens, right? So as those families were dependent upon one another, they had similar economic situations. Maybe it was a white mechanic and a black farmer that engaged in mutual exchange of goods and services. But once you got to the schools were segregated.
Yeah.
Once you got to the churches were segregated. So there's these institutions that try to reinforce segregation. But when you got to the community level, people got to be people. And I think one of the beautiful things about the that we try and capture in Finding Fellowship about Fairhaven, I was wrong. When I first heard the story, I thought the most important date was April 4th, 1968, right? When the mergers decided to happen. What I realized was that what was really important was every day afterwards, right? The decision that everyone made to rededicate themselves to this idea, the little but arduous tasks to desegregate the church, to figure out which hymnal book they were going to sing from, to figure out which sermon style, like that hard work to desegregate the leadership of the women's group and the men's group and the youth group. It was that type of intention that we can all participate in our own communities, right? Like, let's be intentional about how we're going to, what leadership looks like in our PTAs, what leadership looks like in our Rotary clubs, who our friends are, who we engage with, who we invite our children to play with. That's the level of intentionality that Fairhaven demonstrated. And that's the level of intentionality that I think was really beautiful in Quince Orchard that we captured in the documentary.
Yeah, and I will tell you, as a member of Fairhaven and watching my kids grow up there, I didn't get to grow up in Fairhaven, but I will tell you, I live Fairhaven every single day, and it truly does make me look at my leadership and exactly, as I always say to people here at Comfort Cases, if your table is not large enough, build a bigger table. Build. Jason, so listen up. I want to know what's next. What's next for Jason Green? You're a new dad. Everybody, you're going to actually have a link here that you will be able to go and watch Finding Fellowship. I'm asking you to do me a big favor. I'm asking, once you have watched this amazing documentary and truly understand what it means to find fellowship, I then want you to dig into your pocket. I want you to dig into your pocket because I'm telling you something right now. I don't care whether you give $5. I don't care whether you give $10. I don't care whether you give $1,000. I am telling you right now, by giving and donating to this project is actually donating to our future because it is allowing our future to be taught again from what our past was. And if we forget what our past was, then what kind of future do we really have? So I want everybody to please make sure that not only do they watch this amazing documentary, but they also donate because we need to continue the work to get it finished. I want it to be finished while Grandma Green is still here. It is my dream for that to be there because I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a celebration like you've never seen, and you will hear it no matter what county or what state you are from. But Jason, as we end this, what's next?
You're spot on, Rob. We started this documentary because we wanted to encourage people to take action in their own communities. But we also are lifting up this preservation. I would love for all of your viewers and listeners to participate, be a part of this restoration project. Again, people made investments 150 years ago that we've benefited from, and now is the time for us to invest in this site so that we can continue to benefit the community for the next 150 years. So very excited for folks to watch the documentary, to participate in this effort. We've already raised more than $2 million, and this will help us get over this next hurdle. And I'm also excited to share, Rob, that I have a book that's coming out that's going to talk about community. I've teamed up with Penguin Random House, and in June of 2025, Too Precious to Lose will hit the shelves. And I'd love for your viewers to get a
I love
pre-release
it. I
link for
love
that. So
it.
we'll send that out soon.
Well, I will tell you what, I will make sure that my producers reaches out because I want you to be back on the podcast and I want to talk about your book because again, you are my brother and I love the fact that, each and every one of us, whether we're the Greens or the Shears or anyone in between, we want to lift each other up. And that I
Amen.
love you, my friend.
God bless
Everybody,
you.
this is once again, I say this quite often. I say it, this is the ending of my season. Is it my last season? It's season 6. But you know what? I have conversations like this. I get people to get educated and get excited and get people to truly know that they can be part of the change. And that to me really, really moves me. So until our next episode. You continue to go out there and be a good human. Take care, everybody.